Welcome back. Data delivery, data analysis, and data security are three of the biggest themes the special operations community discussed at SOF Week this week in Tampa. Commander Julie Vida, U.S. Navy retired, is Vice President for Defense Growth at ManTech. She's former Deputy Chief Information Officer of the Navy. At SOF Week, I asked her about the differences between securing data in a special operations environment and other types of military environments.
I think the biggest one, honestly, is the likelihood of special operations forces operating in a contested environment, a distributed, denied environment, or purely out on their own tip of the spear. That's what they do. And so when you add that kind of environmental challenge to cyber resilience and kind of cybersecurity, it significantly ups the game in how resilient the systems need to be, and the capability of keeping all the communications and the C2 to keep the troops safe, to keep the special operators safe, keep the mission on time, on target, without the bad guys knowing about it. Very, very, very different from an environment where people are generally connected until the time and place of their choosing when they don't want to be.
Would it be fair to say that the operative phrase in what you just described is without the bad guys knowing about it? Because that obviously kills the whole operation.
That's exactly it. And these days we know that bad guys take a lot of forms. It's not necessarily just the guys on the other side of the hill with, kinetic weapons in their hand. It's the malactors. It's the misinformation going into the systems that might be feeding the operation. It is people doing it for money, people doing it for sport, people doing it for politics, from everywhere. And, we're all living that in the world. But when you think about the applications to special operations, it's quite frightening. It's also encouraging to see. We were talking earlier about the displays here, the demonstrations, the patriotism, the bravery. It's like nothing else, and it gives me a lot of really good. I feel really good about our special operators being able to overcome any of those challenges, and whether they're in the cyber domain or the kinetic domain.
Another difference that it strikes me may be in place in a situation like this is that the organization detecting movement or operations might not necessarily be the adversary that operation is aimed at.
Yes.
Because of the way the landscape looks today. What's the implication for that in the way that one thinks about cyber resilience?
Again, I think it just ups the game significantly to a point where, because this is new for the world. I'm not saying for special ops that they haven't been training for, contested cyber environment for years, but the world is just getting our hands around how bad things can go. If bad actors get into critical infrastructure, if they can get into communications, if they can get into satellites. And so it just escalates all the challenges. And it's added a whole new layer of training and capability and expertise that has not been part of the DNA of really the whole military, but specifically special operations. So there's a whole new world of education and training and getting, big bad guys with guns smart on how do they leverage the technology? How do they, what do they know about coding? What do they know about doing code on the fly? Layers and layers and layers of challenge. But again, our adversaries they're facing the same challenges that we are, and we can't go into specifics, but suffice to say that the U.S. has some capabilities too that we bring to bear. We also have some of those relationships that, we use allies and partners and others to deliver effects when we can't or shouldn't.
What's the force multiplier that technology brings to all of that you just described, and what's the best way to maximize that potential in your view?
Well, the force multiplier is that it can be injected from anywhere. It doesn't have to be on a military base. It doesn't have to be a place that you have to travel a long way to get to or have to have special access to get to. I mean, the computer systems have to have that level of protection and security. But that means that our forces that are always on the go, and they're often disconnected, can maneuver from whatever position they find themselves in the foxhole, to use an older phrase, I'll say. Definitely a force multiplier. Also, for training people, they don't have to go off to school somewhere for 6 weeks or 12 weeks necessarily. They could train from home, really, if the environment is secure enough. So lots of force multipliers there. And it's just the way of the future. It's where the way the world is going. So warfare has to go in that direction too.
Yeah, I'm going to put you back in the Pentagon for a moment, put you back in uniform. What would you want to make sure? Wow, you're very excited about that. What would you like to make sure that the men and women serving under you have from a cyber perspective in 2024, understanding what the landscape looks like today?
Absolutely, they need to have technology that they don't need to think about. They're not all trained in high-end technology, and even if they were, technology changes so fast, it would be impossible to keep the warfighters up to speed on all the latest, updates and just the technology innovations that are rolling off the assembly line like literally every minute. So letting them see success with, and trust is really the best thing that industry can do. And that's not just the technology, but it's the partnerships with the companies that provide the technology. I think that's something that we're having better conversations between industry and public sector and government leaders, but there needs to be more, because that's where that personal human to human trust is built. And when we have it, warfighters are more likely to trust that what we're putting in the cockpit, what we're putting in the submarine, what we're putting on the satellite is something that they just don't need to worry about, and it's going to be there.